Divine Rise, blessed be to your day. May it be everything that you require to create everything that you desire so you can stop playing out that same old tune. That's what we got into this week on the God Hour podcast, Broken Record. That carbon copying. Instead of learning from the pattern, we just keep repeating the pattern over and over and over again, trying to get the same result. And then that has us spinning for pennies. That means we spin the same story that's losing value. The more that we spin it, we're realizing like, yo, I keep saying the same story or keep saying the same thing. What am I missing or learning? And then that stained wax, or the longer that we stay within that position with ourselves, that emotional story, that emotional record we keep spinning, the more distorted that we start to sound. I want you to think about it like this. It's time to get out of your own way. It's time to get out of your own way. Once you realize your power of your words, you just won't be going off at the mouth. Once you realize the power of your thoughts, you just won't think just anything or accept anything that dishonors your thought. Once you realize your presence, you just won't be just anywhere, just be going anywhere. These are some of the things that I learned and I'm experienced and I've mastered throughout my travels on my path. Once you realize, one of the biggest things for us is a lot of times we get it our own way because we don't realize the power of our words that we speak, the conversation that we have with ourselves, the story that we tell, the reason that we tell that story, what we're getting from that story. It's one of the biggest things that we always seem to get stuck in. We don't understand the power just in aspects of telling our story and always having ourselves in a certain position all the time. Sometimes we get so used to, we got so used to the story that we told ourselves in order for us to come into that space. But we didn't realize, like as I said yesterday, that thought process, your behavior cements your emotions in time. So for a lot of us that are not dealing with our emotions, or we're in that space of, we're now in this space where our emotions are face to face with us. Because as I've told you before, there's no more veil. The only thing that's in front of you is your shadows. Whatever you're going into this space, whatever you went into that space with is the things that you're now having to face. From the job, to the relationship, to the friendships, to the places that you keep going to all the time. Whatever you took into that space, that's what you're dealing with. So I'm going to say it one more time. It's time to get out of your own way. It's time to get out of your own way. I remember so many times for myself, I was in my own way. 90% of the time, I was in my own way. My own thoughts stopped me from achieving something. My own thought process, my own emotions, I allowed them to be the guidance or the narrative, and then I was calling it my intuition. In the podcast, this week's episode, I talked about the difference between, and in the lecture and in the podcast, we got deeper into the aspects of the intuition. And the difference between your intuition and listening to your emotional wounds. When we listen to our emotional wounds, peace. When we listen to our emotional wounds and we confuse that with our intuition, our gut feeling, our instinct, you got to check your instinct. Is your instinct or your gut instinct, or is it based in survival? Because remember, your intuition is not based in survival, it's based in growth. Your intuition is based in growth. Safety is in growth. Safety is outside of that growth. So a lot of times we come into that space with ourselves where we think it's our intuition, but it's our own biases. We'll put ourselves into a position and we'll think a certain way, and that'll get in the way of our own thoughts. We'll sit there how many times have you sat there with yourself and you talked yourself out of something? because of the way that you felt. You felt uncomfortable. How many times have you had a conversation with yourself? Remember, I keep having them daily conversations. How many times you had a conversation with yourself and you talked yourself out of what could have been the best thing for you? And then after you talked yourself out of it, since you were stuck within, this is how you understand you're stuck in an emotional wound. After you had the conversation, after you talked yourself out of it, you kept yourself talking yourself out of it. That means you kept having the same conversation based on, yeah, I shouldn't have did it, or maybe I should. You kept going back and forth, teetering back and forth with the conversation, until eventually your thoughts manifested. Because remember, we're used to practicing the negative. Now we got to get used to practicing this positive self-talk. So now in your space, all of a sudden, now something came up to be like, yeah, see, that's why I didn't do it. My intuition don't lie to me. That wasn't your intuition talking to you. There was a lot of times, there was so many opportunities that I've missed based on not listening to, not having the conversation with myself. So many opportunities that I missed, but then it also showed me, because it's not a bad thing, based on the decision, what I was letting myself know is I was not mature. My energy or my emotions were not mature enough to handle that conversation. A lot of times you talk yourself out of things, and then when we go back and look back at it, we look back at it as a bad choice or a bad decision, or it was something that we shouldn't, or we beat ourselves up over. But in reality, to look back at it, so we break this problem mindset and start building these solutions, is understanding that I didn't have all the information that I have now. 90% of the shit that you go through is because you don't have all of the information that you have now. About 95% of what you go through is based on not applying the information that you have now. You're afraid. Sometimes we get afraid to apply that information to our situation where we're at. We get all the information that we need, but since we're so used to reacting, remember we always talking about this reacting. We're so used to reacting, playing out that same song over and over and over again, that we use what we gained based on the behavior to stay in that space. So now we'll try to come back to it and have the same conversation that we keep having with ourselves. We keep having it in the same spaces. A lot of times we go into the space, and I'm letting you know now, because this is something that I had to think about really. It was like after I set the tone, after a while, it was based on the plan that I set, the goals that I set. Why did I set them? As I started to change and started to really work internally, doing that shadow work's the most important part. As I started doing my shadow work, my views changed as I removed layers. So the way that I used to view things through that same old song and dance, through that same old broken record, through that same old wound, when I adjusted to the wound, when I learned the wound, when I forgave myself for the wound, when I submitted to really apologizing to myself, now I'm actually able to change my behaviors. My views changed. And for some of it was immediate. And then for other times, it happened as I kept going. This is going to be this is the part of that process when you start the healing work. You can keep grabbing and grabbing and grabbing and grabbing and grabbing. Ooh, I got this book. Ooh, I got this book. Ooh, I want to get some more information, so I went and got this book to help me with this. But if you're not applying, sometimes that problem is not the book. It's not the book that you're not finding information in. It's where you're trying to apply it to. One of the biggest things that I had to learn for myself was to stop trying to apply to the environment and or escape that reflected my hurt. I had to learn to stop applying what I learned to my hurt. A lot of times we get our new information, we start wanting to manifest, and we start wanting to affirm. But here's the thing about you trying to affirm. Affirming and learning versus hoping and coping. Remember, I talked about that before. You're breaking out of this hoping and coping narrative. Hoping, like you're hoping for the best, and then you're coping when you don't get what you need to get. Now you coming into this space, greatest. Now you coming into this space with yourself. Now you coming into this space with yourself where it's time for you to really start looking at, I can't say my precursor. Remember, we talked about precursors. I can't say that I am in gratitude, the flow of gratitude. I cannot say I'm in the flow of being grateful. I can't say I'm in the flow of abundance and prosperity. And then I stay in the space that's not based on gratitude. No one in that space or my environment's grateful for their day. No one's in gratitude within that space. Everybody's complaining in that space. Everybody's butting heads in that space. How can I say that I'm in gratitude and then stay in that space? Because all I'm telling my higher self is, I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for that BS. It's time to get out your own way. Every time that I say that I'm grateful and I'm in gratitude, I'm confident. I'm stepping up to the plate. I'm learning. I'm going to heal. I'm about to become more open. The first thing that's going to pop up, which will be the distraction, until I learn how to set that plan and that course of action. So now I sit in this position. I'm like, I'm grateful and I'm in gratitude. But the moment that I say it, I go walk down the street. I go walk down the street over to somewhere where they're going to be fighting at. So am I grateful for the motherfuckers fighting? Conversation with yourself. Sometimes you're in your own way. This rising, as I was getting ready for the gym, I got this shiver, and I knew it was my grandmother. I was watching my grandmother mop the kitchen. So like, I just joined my grandmother in mopping the kitchen. I really legit went and got the mop off the balcony, started mopping the kitchen. And I remember I was in this dreamscape as I'm getting ready in that trance. And I'm like, I always remember like when we got kicked out of the shit that happened between my aunt not taking the money to the landlord and we lost our house back when I was like 10. I remember every Tuesday and every Friday, my grandmother would be up around like 5 o'clock mopping the floor. And I remember one time I asked her, why do you always mop the floor so early? She was like, child, to stay out of my own way. And then I didn't understand it until I was sitting in that space. The only thing that's stopping me is me being in my own way with my old thoughts. I'm telling myself that I'm grateful. I'm telling myself that I'm in gratitude. I'm telling myself that I'm great. I'm telling myself that I'm a God. But I'm not really understanding that's my precursor. Everything that comes up after that is something that I really need to learn, and why. If I say that I'm a God, I'm a creator. You say you're a goddess, you're a creator. But if you keep going into spaces where you've already made some shit happen, that was based on your behavior, all you're doing is saying, okay, I'm going to continue creating this. Stay out of your own way. You want something to happen, you got to get out of your own way. You got to tap into that thought process with yourself and really get out of your own way. You say you want to advance, you want to grow, you want to heal. You got to get out of your own way. The things that you got to get out of your way are the things that you know aren't healthy for you. You know are not providing any growth. You know it's not giving you any aspects of in-depth learning to yourself. But you keep going into those spaces because it's a behavior. It's time to address those behaviors. As you start to address your behaviors, as I started addressing my behaviors and really started taking accountability for my actions and my behaviors, I noticed that when I left out of a space, or I became into a space of absence from a space, I could see the truer perspective of that space. I could see my very reflection inside of that space. I can see what it looked like for example, for me wanting to acquire something, but I didn't understand the mechanics of it. I can see it now. I can now see the changes that I needed to apply in order for me not to be in that same position. Because that's all it is. Everything that's on this lower level of you is just based on behavior. That's your timeline that you get stuck in. Your behavior cements your emotions into your timeline. You got used to reacting. It's all right. Now it's time to learn how to respond. You got used to reacting the same. You got used to the same reactions every single time. So you kept skipping over. Some of y'all like 6.7, 6.8, 6.9, 6.5, 10, 12, 13, 20 years going down the line, and you are not realizing that you're in a karmic relationship. Not just in love interest. I'm talking about friends. I'm talking about with karmic family. All into that aspect. You keep repeating the same lessons over and over every year. It's time to step out. It's time to step out. So you can see the lesson. So you can see the board. So you can see the vision board. You got a whole contract and a whole vision board that you wrote up already. But you ain't looking at your lessons. You didn't set a plan. You didn't set a plan outside of that story that you kept telling yourself. You didn't set a plan outside of that song you kept singing. You didn't set a plan outside of that. It's okay. It's time to actually start setting that plan. It's time to actually start setting yourself up for success. There's nothing stopping you other than you being in your own way. You know exactly what you need to do every time something pop up. Every time you say, oh, I want to go do this, but then what's the first thing that pop up? The thing you know you needed to be dealing with, the thing that you've been dismissing. This is the difference between dismissing and submitting. The true aspects between dismissing and submitting. Submitting to the attributes of that space so you can learn, rather than dismissing the emotional trigger so you can just continue reacting. That's what happens a lot of times for us in our space. One of the biggest things that happens, we dismiss and we feel like we're submitting. No, you're dismissing. If you're stuck within that emotional attachment, you're emotionally projecting, you're not listening to your intuition. That means you're not listening to the true voice of yourself because it isn't confident enough yet. It ain't loud enough yet. Or sometimes it's loud enough, but you keep trying to dismiss it, trying to stay within that position to keep getting something from there. If I stay here long enough, maybe it'll change. If I do this long enough, maybe it'll change. If I take this away, maybe it'll change. That sounds like everything outside of you inside of that space. I said it before, like COVID-19 saved my life. COVID-19 saved my life. Because without it, I would have keep doing the same song and dance. I would have been sitting here today, sitting there with the same thought process of saying to myself, all I need is time to sit down and really put my plan in motion. I'll still be sitting here saying that. COVID-19 sat my ass down. I talked about it in last week's lecture, especially. I was like, COVID-19 sat my ass down, and I had a choice to make. I got paid every single week. I had a choice to make. Was I going to feel good or get better? Was I going to feel good or get better? I was in a position where everything was in aspect of balance. So I was like, I got a chance to get good. I got a chance to get better. It's going to be uncomfortable in my thought process. It's going to challenge me a lot, but I'm ready for that challenge. I am the challenge. I am the solution. This is my solution for growth. I didn't want to come back into this same cycle the same time next year, not with anything to usher in or to say that I'm celebrating. Get out of your own way. That old way of thinking, it's time to challenge it. That avoiding them steps that you need to take, it's time to challenge them. It's time to actually take that step. It's time to challenge that old elevation, that new climb. It's time to actually get in there. Stop keeping your aspects and the behaviors based on time. because this is what's going to happen. And I learned it. I had the secret. Had the secret all along. But I looked and I was like, yo, time ain't got shit to do with me aging, my weight gain, my weight loss, my learning. Time ain't got shit to do with it. It's my behaviors. Time ain't got shit to do with any of the stuff that I'm sitting here talking about. Time don't exist. I remember the craziest part. I remember I was sitting at my job, mad as hell because these niggas didn't do shit. And I remember I sent a text to my love and I was like, time don't fucking exist. And I said that shit out loud. I didn't understand why the fuck I said it. It was the spirit came through and said, nigga, time don't exist. And it took me up until now, this last couple of weeks, to realize time don't exist. Only my behavior does. Once I change my behavior, I can acknowledge my emotions. Once I change my behavior and take ownership of my behavior, I can now start working in the aspects of my emotions. Once I start working in my emotions, I can become time. I can become the time that I'm wasting. It's only based on your behavior that you waste time. It's only based on you staying in that state of reaction that you waste time. And then you call yourself catching up. And the moment that you start catching up, since you're still used to reaction and we're working through these reactions and we're learning how to respond, we learn how to respond better. Some of y'all are in a space right now where the things that you did last year are now way different than what you did. The things that you're doing this year are way different than you did last year. Bravo, hats off to you. Keep going. But some of y'all are still sitting there, I can wait until tomorrow. I can wait until next week. You're allowing that behavior of procrastination to kick in. Only thing stopping you is you. Only thing stopping you. Only thing stopping you. The same song that you want to go put the same record on and you want to keep spinning that same broken record, feeling sorry for yourself, letting it spin around, hoping that you get some plays off of it so someone can actually come into your space. That shit over with. I remember when I really got into my behavior, that shit was over with. I kept spinning that same record and then wonder why I kept getting the same results. I kept playing the same damn song. Every space that I go into, I talk about my life and the problems that I've been through and how nobody trusted me and nobody loved me. But at no point in time was I looking at that record as it was spinning and I was sitting there taking an accountability for myself. And then I started taking those accountabilities for myself. Why am I so dependent upon everybody loving me? Why am I so dependent upon everybody being the solution to my problems? Maybe it is time for me to have this conversation with myself. Took that record off the record player. Took that disc out of the CD changer. Took that tape out and really started addressing myself and started writing out myself. Like, where is it really coming from? What am I not dealing with? Why does it always seem to be that every issue that's in my life is with a woman? What emotional wounds based in a woman aspect, in the feminine aspect, am I not dealing with? Why every problem that I got with niggas in that aspect, what is it something that I'm not dealing with in that maternal wound? Why is my behavior always being challenged and I'm always being locked down where I feel like I'm being oppressed? And then I started understanding my environment and what it was in purpose for. Once I started understanding that, I was like, oh shit, nigga, I got the key. Now it's time to start doing that work. Your shadow work is an ongoing process until you integrate with it. And even after you integrate with it, after you deal with whatever you took into that void and you go to that no self, now it's time to start building on that side. It's now time to start building up there. Everything that you build in the higher aspects, it matriculates down here into your life. Everything that you build in the higher aspects of your mind, it matriculates down here. It goes through the same emotional channels. This is why having y'all lives, this is why sometimes our lives, it get really, really hard and really, really hectic because something need to be destroyed. But we don't get deeper into that throughout the week. One of the things that I talked about in this week's episode of the podcast was the last relationship I was in before I was homeless. And instead of me dwelling on that moment and not taking accountability, I look back at 3 years prior, before that relationship started, and where I was at in my life. I had mentors. I was learning a lot of new things. I was expanding my portfolio, so to speak. I was expanding my portfolio. But because I was not learning the lessons and I was dismissing the emotional triggers, by the time I got to that point, everything fell apart. Everything fell apart. And I got deep into that on the podcast. The record stopped playing and I couldn't keep using the same lines because I wasn't grateful. I wasn't in gratitude. So everything got wiped away from me because I wasn't ready for it. I was acknowledging I wasn't ready for it. I was in my own way. I wanted it my way. But I had to understand wanting it my way was my lower self thinking. Wanting it to desire what I wanted to create, that was my higher aspect. So I really had to do that work. Them 2 months when I didn't have no place to go were the best 2 months ever when I look back at it. I had no responsibility. All I needed was some water. If it got too hot, I would sit under some shade somewhere. Best 2 months of my life. I'm thankful for them 2 months. I'm thankful for all the shit that I've been through. Because without it, I couldn't be sitting where I'm at now. Without that shit, I couldn't be where I'm at right now. I couldn't embrace the lessons. I couldn't be a teacher. I couldn't be a counselor. I couldn't be teaching shadow work. It's hard. Yes, it is hard. But that's the best part. We have to understand that we don't want nothing easy. I don't want nothing easy. We got to understand that shit ain't easy. It's not even about being hard or easy. It's more in the aspects that we try to make it more complex than it seems. It's a simple formula. If I accept my behavior, this is something I learned. If I accept my behavior and what I created based on my behavior, because I'm a creator, then I can learn to move forward. Sometimes I got to sit with myself a lot longer. Sometimes I got to let go of this. But I'm running out of time. I let that go a long time ago. I'm running out of time. As I told you, I'm 35. But I'm going to be 27 forever. I had to let go of a lot of weight. A lot of the stuff that was making me age, making me hurt, making me ache, making my pains was me being in my own way. Me avoiding the shadow. Me avoiding the work. I thought I was really putting in work, but I was only maintaining my comfort. It's time to get uncomfortable with yourself. It's time to really get uncomfortable. It's going to get uncomfortable. It's like a bruise. It's going to get uncomfortable before it gets to where you need it to be. But I can promise you this. It's lit up here. You think the little bit of information that we got based on, okay, cool, we know who we are, we know where we came from, we know we're royalty, we know that we're greatness. You think that part was the fun part? That was the shit to make you feel good. Now it's time to make yourself get better. Everything outside of you, that's the shit that's gonna help you get better. That's what it's here for. When you look at it that way, it changes the whole perspective of everything that's going on around you. When I started really looking at that, it changed my perspective on everything. I don't think about habit of stuff. I don't get distracted by habit or distractions that I used to get distracted by. I'm in my world. I'm in my world. It's time to build my universe. I'm a builder. If I'm a builder, let me build. Let me learn. I got to break some shit down before I build it. I got to let go of the need and the desperation. Because if everything is meant for me, I already have what I desire. It's going to be in my space anyway. All I got to do is set it up. I got to start evoking and building those spaces for it. I got to start setting that plan, becoming that solution. Got to stop playing that same broken record. And that's what we got into this week on the God Hour podcast. It's streaming now. Spotify, iTunes, Breaker, iHeartRadio, Alexa, say God Hour podcast. We got into that broken record. Stop trying to bring your past into this current state and stop trying to fix your past. It's time to look in this now. Stop trying to fix your past, because some of that stuff you're going to realize that when you really start working on it, and this is one thing that I did learn, and I'm learning, when you really start working on those aspects of your past, some of that shit ain't even yours. Some of that shit's some things that you inherited. Some of them issues that you have, they're inherited from the emotional catalyst that your parents didn't deal with. So, and now you looking at it like, oh, that's what it is. Let me take accountability and stop it here. That's what you need to realize. And then as you start advancing, you go into your true position. Some of y'all are hoping that your mother becomes the mother that you want her to be. But in reality, you've been your mother's mother. You've been the mother to your mother the entire time. You've been the father to your father the entire time. Instead of your sisters and your brothers and family members being in the position that they're in, you actually, the role that you took on, that you thought it was so hard that I had to take on being the mother, or I had to be on being the father role, I had to raise my brothers and sisters. Nigga, that was you, that was who you were. It's time to it's time to take ownership in what you were. I want you to be the best. I desire you to be the best. Everything from shadow work consultation, inbox me, or hit me up at GodaCoAlchemistLLC.com. If you would need that, if you feel like it's resonating, it's time for you to get that reading, get that mini consult, hit me up in the inbox of GodaCoAlchemistLLC.com. There's no more veil. There's no more stuff in your way other than the things that you have to address. It's time for you to start. It's time for you to heal. It's time for you to do that work. It's only going to get more and more heavy based on your behavior, keeping your emotions stuck on that timeline. It's time to get better. I love you. We love us. Ashe.